well, this is my first Hilia, which is a practice for my second Hilia, which was the more elaborate piece. The Hilia is a very significant piece of artwork for any calligrapher or illuminator. It is the artwork that we generally make when we're about to receive our apprenticeship. So the Hilia is the piece that authenticates your apprenticeship in illumination. And the reason why we choose a Hilia to make is for several reasons. It's a very complex piece of artwork. So there are opportunities to illuminate in a circle and in little rectangular shapes. There is a large outer border and very slim inner borders, and there's a variety of different styles of illumination. So it's a piece where you can showcase your skills. But more importantly, the Hilia is also it's a description in words of the physical and moral attributes of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so it shows our love for the Prophet and our commitment to the art, which is the really important thing about the Hilia, and why it's deemed an honour to be asked to make one, and why it's really so significant. So just to point out a few of the different areas of the Hilia, different parts of the composition, we have a section around here, which is like a crescent, and it's called the Hilal. And this surrounds the description of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And then we have a wider area, which is called a Shamsa. And a Shamsa means a little sun. And then we have the names of the 4 Khalifs in these roundels. And then various ayahs from the Quran. The illumination in the Shamsa is generally these very small detailed flowers, and then we have a large outer border, and it's very important that although there are these different elements, everything has to harmonize together. So even the design stage of the Hilia takes a lot of time. Contrary to what many people think, we don't just take designs from a book somewhere. Everything is designed bespoke to that particular piece of calligraphy. So the illuminator will consider the style of the calligraphy, the size of the calligraphy, the character of the piece before they start painting. And it's very common to try many different composition ideas first, until you reach the final design. And you work on each element separately, and then try and put it all together so that it harmonizes. We also have practice pieces that we make, just to make sure that everything is harmonized by the time we finish our painting. What many people don't realize is that the calligrapher and the illuminator are most of the time 2 separate people. So the calligrapher will write down all of the calligraphy and create their composition, and then they hand the work over to the illuminator for them to complete the border work. So this piece, before there was any illumination on it, there was just the lines of calligraphy. And the calligrapher writes on a special paper called ahar paper. In this case, the ahar was stuck onto a board, which is it's a more suitable paper for illumination. So this is a handmade paper around the edges. We prepare our papers in various different ways. For illumination, it's very important that the paper is very smooth, so that the brush doesn't get caught in the fibres of the paper, and it enables us to make very fine lines. So we size the paper with a kind of a glue, which is like a mixture of starch and water, and a pinch of salt. Although there are many different paper sizes that you can use. And then once we spread that over the surface of the paper and it's dry, we take a paper burnisher, which is like a big agate stone, and we rub that over the surface of the paper to make everything smooth so that it's ready for us to work on. So before we start painting on here, we spend quite a lot of time designing the composition, and the design is done separately on a sheet of, or several sheets of tracing paper. We will mark out the areas that we need to illuminate and copy them onto tracing paper, and then create our design. And that can take several weeks of work. I remember for my ijaza Hilia, it was at least a month of full-time work of just designing before moving on to actually painting the composition. Generally, we just design one small section and then repeat, which makes a harmonious pattern all the way around. And then when we're ready to start painting, we take the tracing paper and we transfer the design onto the calligraphy using pencil. In this folder, I have a lot of my designs for one of the Hilias that I've worked on. It's very important to make sure that the design is correct before we start painting. So it's a very time-consuming process, and we don't immediately just settle on one option. We normally try a few different ideas and then and see which works best with the calligraphy. I think this is the one that we settled on for the large outer border, but there are lots of different elements to the composition as well. So this is the area where I used large flowers, but there are sections where there are much smaller flowers as well. And I'd like to show you this practice sheet here. So these are the flowers that you were just looking at, painted with colour, and within the same Hilia there is a border, a thin border like this, and there is a section around the calligraphy, which is called the shamsa, and this was the trial for that there. So we have to try and make sure that everything harmonises together before we start painting on the final piece. And we did make some changes to this. I think we changed the colour of the outline here. It was too red, so we went for a red ochre instead of this, which looks more like an alizarin colour, I think. The most important material in illumination is something called shell gold. Shell gold is a paint that we make from gold leaf. So we grind up the gold leaf with a few drops of honey and water to make something that's like a sediment of gold, gold, water and honey. And then we wash that into a large bowl, and we filter it off so that we filter off all of the impurities in the gold. And the final stage is to filter the gold through a piece of silk into a small cup. And what you're left with is just pure gold with all of the honey and all of the dust and oil washed away. And then when you come to use the gold, you mix it with a pinch of gelatine or gum arabic and water. And the gold is the first material that's applied to the page. So the gold comes first. We have burnishes, which are made from agate, and a burnisher is a tool that we use for polishing the gold. And then afterwards we add the various colours to the illumination as well. And blue and gold are probably the most common and the most popular colours that are used in illumination. One of the practical reasons is that gold doesn't tarnish, so it will always remain the same colour. But there are also certain symbolic reasons as well. In one of his books, Martin Lings mentions the symbolism of the gold as representing the glory of Allah. So it's appropriate that we use something that stays that is eternally true, that doesn't change colour. Which is part of the symbolism of the gold. And he also mentions that the blue, the lapis, can represent the mercy of Allah, which is why the two are used together, the glory and the mercy together. If you look in the Shamsa area over here, the gold is more yellowish, and that is an 18 karat gold. In the stems and leaves of these flowers is a 22 karat gold. And then the Hilal, I think, is a 23 or 24 karat gold in the Hilal. So there are at least 3 different colours of gold in this composition. This is my ijaza Hilia. Now the composition of the Hilia is the same, the format is the same, but with the ijaza Hilia there is an additional extra section, which is here. And this is the section that authenticates me as a fully fledged illuminator. It mentions my name and also the name of my teacher and my teacher's teacher. And it says that I am now a fully fledged illuminator. Here are a few of my materials. I'd like to show you some of my brushes. So this is them. They're very, very small, of course, because we work so very fine. I keep a few of my brushes just for gold as well, so that they don't contaminate the other colours, because mixing gold with the other colours can change the colour of the gold, obviously. This one here is a miniature brush, which I find helpful occasionally for some of the details. It's not strictly for illumination, but it's a miniature painting brush made from squirrel hair. These brushes are all sable brushes. This is a larger one for some of the bigger areas and washes. And I like pointed brushes because I can get very, very fine lines, and by increasing the pressure I get the line variation, the different weight of line that I use in some of the illumination techniques. So generally I hold the brush very upright, not like a pencil like this, because as the brush puts pressure on the paper, the bristles spread, which gives a thicker line. And generally for illumination we want a very fine line, so I hold the brush quite upright and just use the point of the brush on the paper. So it's hardly touching the paper, it's very, very light. And in fact, all the pencil practice that illuminators do before they do the brush work helps them to develop sensitivity to the brush. Here are some shell gold that I use. These were made by hand, and you'll notice that they are different colours. So the one in my left hand is 18 karat gold. And in Turkey they call this green gold because it has a slightly greenish quality. This here is moon gold, which is called moon gold because it's mixed with a little bit of silver and palladium. So I think it's 23 karat gold that is mixed with silver and palladium, and it gives it a slightly silvery sheen. This here is a 23 karat gold. So you can see the difference in the colours. And the most commonly used colours of gold that we use are 18 karat, 22 karat, 23 and 24, and then sometimes moon gold, and sometimes a 12 karat gold, which looks silvery, but that's much less common. Well, the shells used to be used as palettes traditionally by illuminators and by miniature painters. And they're just perfect size, a beautiful natural material, and that's where the name shell gold came from. Now I like to use shells because they're quite large, so I can make a large amount of colour, and they hold more than a small palette, which is maybe about that big. So I can store my paints quite easily in there, and I like being connected to nature, so I like using shells.